Hey, hey, hey. Hello and greetings. This is the Product Uncensored show with your host, Colin Pell. I hope everyone is doing fine. You're keeping safe. These are crazy times in Southeast Asia, not just for product managers, for everyone. So I hope, everyone is especially keeping sane. Mental health is something we don't talk about enough. So yeah, I just want to put a call out there that if you're not doing okay, reach out for help somewhere. Coming back to the show, we've got another fantastic show today. All our shows are great because we get great guests, not because of anything else. So let's quickly run through the introduction for the show, and then we can get into the nice, juicy part of the show. You want to find out more about us, you can check us out on www.productuncensored.com. And if you like our videos, or rather, if you prefer a video type of interviews, you can go to YouTube, where that's where our videos are at. Don't forget to click on the like and then the subscribe, and also the all important click on the bell this side. Yeah, so it's going to be there. If you like the audio version of our shows, we are on all major podcasting platforms. Our most popular one right now is Spotify, but then we are on all the others as well coming up. Here, messing this up really badly today. And lastly, if you would like to support this show, again, it's all voluntary. You can do it for the price of the coffee, and you can go to buymeacoffee.com and you can do that. Okay, that is all the introduction that you need. So let's jump right into today's show. We've got a very special guest, obviously. He's special because he's the guy that you see if you would have joined Hard Things About Product recently. He's the host. He's also got a very stellar career. He's worked in all the big companies such as Amazon, PayPal, Intuit, and he is currently the Vice President of Products for PropertyGuru Group. His name is Vivek Kumar. Welcome to the show, Vivek.
Hey, Colin. Nice to see you after a long time. Thanks for having me.
Yes. I'm always trying to find this balance between having guests from not all of the same area. So I'm always trying to find who, and I was thinking, how is it that I've not thought about Vivek? And yeah, so that's why I thought it'd be great to have you on the show. So thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show as well. For those of you who don't know, right, reaching out to people and asking them to be on the show is fun, but it's also harrowing at times because some people just turn you down. My heart has been broken many times, so I'm very thankful that Vivek didn't break my heart. So,
hey, by the way, why would I break your heart? I'm a big fan of your show. I've been following your episodes. I'm a big fan. So
wow.
I'm honored to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. Wow. Okay, now we can't do the show properly because my head is so big now. So, but thank you so much for that, Vivek. So maybe you can start with telling us a little bit about yourself, and also how you got into product management. Let's start there.
Well, thanks. So see, I've been, I was recently reflecting about career and whatnot, and then it was interesting. I saw my career got almost like 17 years experience right now. And then if I look at my career, there are three parts to my career. So the first third is a story of startups where I tried a lot, lost my money, lost my savings. That's my first third of the career. And then what I said is, okay, look, maybe startups are not for me. So I start taking refuge in the bigger companies. That's when I sought asylum in PayPal, Amazon, and Intuit. Then once you started building the muscles in the bigger company, then I felt like, okay, maybe something to do with scale up. And my last 5 years with PropertyGuru. So that's kind of my career in a nutshell. But that's a great question in terms of how did you get into product. Look, I think I started my career post my B school, joining the Indian IT services industry, which was like flourishing in those days, which is early 2000s that we're talking about. And then just upon joining, I realized that somehow the things were not adding up. For instance, I was consulting for a Fortune 50 company as a financial consultant, whereas I didn't have the backbone of finance. And so I was asked to train on a tool. I was asked to train on a domain. And then I went there, and then the next project was something else. So I had to train on marketing to go through that, go and consult them. So I felt like this is something which is not jiving with me. So, and also when I was looking around, Indian ecosystem did not have a product. So somewhere I was very deliberate that I wanted to move from a services industry into a product industry. So this was way back in 2006. And then I was fortunate enough that I bumped into this startup, well-funded startup. We were launching online gaming in India. And in there, I went and I walked into this very fancy, cool-looking office, which has got a basketball court inside. It's very colorful. And the CTO guy tells me that, Vivek, you know what, maybe you can give a shot at it, provided you start as a program manager and you work your way through. I was lucky that 3 months into joining, he saw some potential in me, and I started doing products. That's kind of how I landed into product, but never looking back after that.
Wow. Okay. So that means when you joined, you pretty much jumped straight in, and did you know what you were doing at that time?
Yeah, we pretty much. When I look at it's super archaic and rudimentary. See, those days the benchmark companies were Yahoo and AOLs and the like, and product was evolving, and the way of doing product was one of the biggest things in the product that time was writing PRDs very eloquently, ensuring that your tech team was all in place with that. So I think that's where we started. I think the pivot actually happened big time in the product management as an industry as a whole is in around 2009-10, after Eric Ries, Steve Blank, bunch of these guys did what they did. But pretty much it's a very linear approach that we did in those days. It was fun. It was fun. Yeah. Although we didn't call these lean experiments, we did our own set of experiments and we learned.
Yeah. So I'm guessing you're saying that your foray into product management sort of predated, the product management boom where you had all the writers and thinkers who were, coming up with ways of doing things. So at that point in time when you first started, right, where were you getting your ideas and your resources from, so to speak?
I was fortunate to be under a great boss under that time. He was a prodigy. He is a prodigy even now, to that extent that he always had a forward thinking. That guy was a director of product at Yahoo. And so I had the fortune of learning under him as to what does it really look like. I mean, this was one of the benchmark companies at that point in time. So it was good to know from him, and I kind of learned the tricks of the trade there. But at the end of the day, Colin, I keep telling this to people as well. Product, in very many senses, also a lot to do with common sense, persistence, and what have you. Like, for instance, my first product that I was handling was called Zapac TV. And our mission, so just to give you some context, we were backed by a massive multi-billion-dollar conglomerate called Reliance, and we had a $40 million funding way back in 2006. And $40 million in Indian currency, it's a lot, right? And so we were tasked to build YouTube for India way back in 2006, and I was heading that product. And then the question is, how will YouTube for India come in? Because it's a user-generated content platform. And Indians at that point in time were still not attuned to this behavior of taking videos and submitting it. So it was a very interesting journey. So you test something, you fail, you do something else, you fail, and something clicked eventually where we turned around the product. But intuitively, these things happened. There was no name called experiment and what have you. But we kind of said that, oh, can we do this? Oh, this is not happening. Can we do that? And then eventually we landed where we landed. So answering your question, there were some things. I was blessed to the good boss. And second is we learned some of the things very hard way.
Okay. So, I mean, this is very early on in the show, but I think, given that you mentioned it, again, I like to ask questions that come into my head, right? So when you say that, product is a lot to do with common sense. So if I were to ask you a question, Vivek, is product management a science or an art?
It's a part science and part art, in my opinion. There's a lot of component of product management which can never be taught, said, and the rest is all science. So what's interesting is I feel like I feel like industry is now plagued with making this a science deliberately, with lot many frameworks and models floating around, which is not bad, by the way. But
Mm.
one needs to have the judgment to how much you embrace it, how deep you embrace it, because I feel like beyond a point, it starts killing your creativity. The softer part kind of just dies down because you're always searching for the models and framework in your mind to fit it into a situation. So it's just kind of a mix of both and the balance of both. And I always advise and suggest that if people can take a measured approach towards this framework and models, it'll benefit them as they grow ladder up in the product or even in the career.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there because I think one of the beautiful things about product management is that there's a lot of space to maneuver, right? You can, there are ways to attack a problem. So I think that's the creative part that, I personally enjoy that part the most. There's a problem and now how do you go about solving it? And then, there are all the different ways. It's like trying to put a Rubik's Cube together, but at the same time, there is a science to it. But I totally agree with the part that you mentioned where, like, yeah, at some certain point, if your whole life is dictated by, frameworks and other people's thoughts, then you're you're missing out on a very huge chunk of the creative side of product management, which I think is the fun part. So, yeah, I think if, yeah, sorry, you're going to say something.
No, I was just saying that recently there was this, I'm part of this group where there's some really good product conversations that happen. And there was this interesting topic about, so these are all like VP products of some organization or the other. So these guys, one of them asked this question, hey, I'm having a problem with recruiting product managers because on the interview level, they do well because they know all these frameworks and what have you. So all the problem solvings are pretty much going very well. But when you're putting them in the real situation and then something stares at them, the decision making is under question. So that's when you really see the disconnect about leaning too much on model versus just taking things as it comes and growing as well. So there's always a balance. And and that for me is the difference between the art and the science, right? The science is the modeling and how you can framework something out as long as there's a clear causal theory associated with that. So do X and then Y will happen. And then on the art side, there's so many things you just can't capture. You have a rogue boss, you have a rogue stakeholder, you've got a product that you just shipped and conked off after even customers said they wanted it. That's just no book can teach you. I mean, you just need to be there and make the best out of it.
Yeah, yeah. I was telling a friend this quite a while back. I was saying that after a while you realize that with all the different frameworks, they're all focusing on like specific areas. But you realize that the kind of common goal is kind of the same. So just choose certain frameworks that fit what you like to do or what works for you. Yeah, not what you like to do, but what works for you, and then stick with those few. You don't have to be like this walking Wikipedia of everything product management frameworks, and every book that's under the sun. So yeah, maybe that's a good approach. But yeah, I like that answer because I know some people who think that product management should be a science, and some people who would fall on the other side and say, oh, it's all about how well you think outside the box, and yeah, it's true. But I think it's always a good mix of both. All right, yeah, thank you so much. I mean, sorry, I didn't plan to jump into all the heavy questions right off the bat from your first.
No, I love
first
that.
job.
I love that. I'm a student of. I'm an avid reader of strategy, by the way. And there was this. If ever you get a chance, pick up this book called Strategy Safari by this guy called Henry Mintzberg.
Mm-hmm.
It's a loaded book, by the way, unless you're in really deep, big thinking. And there it's the same thing. He argues about whether strategy is an art or science. And there is some models like competitive advantage, value chain analysis, and all of these things, five forces model. There's a whole ton of frameworks there. But those frameworks only go that far. And so it's something that has been always with me.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so you started at that startup as your first product role, but you actually had a break in between. You actually did consultancy before going back to product management as well. So I'm kind of curious about that part. Was that like an intentional decision to try out consulting?
No, so my first initial part of the career before I joined PayPal was pretty much punctuated by each of my bosses rehiring me at various junctures. So I started my career with Wipro. My Wipro boss goes into this company called SAS. I don't know if you've heard of it. SAS, one of the foremost analytic tools company and billion-dollar company in even those days by revenue. So what's interesting is he hired me to say that, Vivek, you know what, we are selling these solutions to the customers and we're not productizing it. Can you help us productize it? And so it was a very unique challenge that I went in. Super interesting, Colin. And in 2007, the leading banks in India were handling cash in their ATM. Have you ever thought how a bank can manage cash in the ATM? If you manage it right. So usually the way this works is if you leave too much cash in the ATM, you're losing money. If you have insufficient cash in the ATM, you're dinging your customer experience.
Yeah.
So then what's the right amount of cash? Because if you have that surplus cash, if you can park it in the central bank, you're going to earn interest. So that was the problem these banks were grappling with. And what's interesting is, so I was brought in to productize some of it. So it was very, very interesting. So we went about taking a solution, productizing it, and then taking it to the bank. So the consulting that you're seeing is pretty much still a product role, but with a different twist.
Right. Yeah. Because the question that I was going to ask, and I think it's still related though, is the difference between doing product as a consultant, or rather being or in a company where services is key, versus being a product person in a product company where there is a product to sell. So that was the question I was actually thinking about when I saw that you had consultant experience.
Yeah, that is a great question. I have consulted a couple of startups through my journey of the career. So here are my lessons. There's no product consulting job, if you will. I mean, when you are into a product consultant, you're pretty much owning the product and running the show. And so what I've done, my lessons in early years were when you end up consulting, you end up doing the whole gig for them. It's whole 9 yards. There's no halfway measure of this. What I've seen things to evolve in these days, and very well though, is that you start specializing in aspects of product which you want them to help with, and then that curtails your boundary and what have you. Like for instance, today you have these product discovery consultants who designate a certain number of hours, who come and help your organization grow as the product discovery, and they move on. So I think this notion of specializing kind of saves you the boundary of, like, let's say you work 2 days with one organization, you could work 2 days in another organization. But overall, product consulting, in my opinion, is a myth. You essentially just double down as a head of product or a product manager and end up working there full time.
Wow, that's very interesting. Very interesting. I've actually resisted going into consulting firms for a long time, for product, simply because I've always felt like my goal is I want to join an organization where I can see the product evolve and grow together, like, see the impact of whatever you've done, right? And so I had a chance to do consulting, like a sort of a part-time consulting for this organization. And I realized that, like what you said, right? You end up doing everything for them, and it's essentially like a full-time product role.
Right.
But then after you're done, you're like, oh, I've helped you do the product discovery, hear all the user stories, and these are how, these are the areas where we need to be careful of when you're talking to the vendor who's going to be doing the development work, blah, blah, blah. And then after that, it's, oh, okay, thank you, bye-bye. And like, okay, that it always feels like you've been left hanging. So yeah, that experience actually sort of validated my own bias, I guess, when I thought that, product consulting, that's always the difficult part, right? You're sort of like doing all the hard work, and then when it's done, you don't see the end result.
That's a great point. I agree.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just thought that was fun. All right. Let's talk a little bit about your time when you decided to move to Singapore. Like, because prior to this, you're talking about, the first part of your career was in India. What made you decide to move to Singapore?
So my career was more punctuated at that point in time with experience largely centered around US and some part of Europe. But these were two continents I've possibly covered really well. And when I was looking at the next growth journey for me, I was looking at what is one place which I don't know, and somehow things added up. I mean, there was East Asia, and alongside came a couple of opportunities my way, and one led to the other. So I've never known this market, and I'm glad that I made the decision to come back and understand how this part of the world works as well. So that was primarily the intent of the move.
Okay, but how did you make the decision? Because if you, like you said, right, you didn't know very much about this part of the world, and obviously you've been experiencing the life of what it could be in mature product markets, and India itself, it was coming up at the time, and then you've decided to up and leave for an area which a space, sorry, a location, yeah, that's the right word, a location that you're not so familiar with.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of principles here. One is when I look at my career, I wanted to go through the breadth of experience that I had. So I've done my startups of my own. I've been part of startups. Then I've been part of big companies where I was able to, like my last product with Intuit was a $500 million big TurboTax. I was managing the entire product line for TurboTax. So the next question for me is when I was looking at what next for me, I was looking at something where I can scale up. So that was one principle. So agnostic of geography, that was what I was looking at. Second is the market knowledge. I felt like, okay, so why don't I just go out and explore something new and different compared to what I've been doing in various forms. And that's where East Asia occurred to me as one of the top choices up there. And the third for me is, and yeah, so I think these are the primary things. The driving factor for me is I see these things as a very reversible decisions. When I took it, it was a lot of inertia for me to move. I was doing pretty well. I didn't quit. Things were going good. It was pretty hard for me to move, but I said, what goes at the best, you're not going to like the place and you're going to come back. That's a big deal. So let's go out and move. So it turned out to be a very, very good decision in the hindsight.
Yeah, I would think so too, right? Because you've been here quite a while. So yeah, very nice. Okay. Yeah. So it looks like the decision was driven more by what you wanted to achieve or what you felt was the next challenge for you as well. Very interesting. And so I guess moving along those lines as well, because you talked about your career in like three brackets, right? The sort of the startups and where you try doing your own thing, and then doing the whole enterprise, and then going into the scale ups. Which part did you enjoy, or do you enjoy the most? Because you've done the full gamut of product management in all three sectors.
All right. So look, I've enjoyed all these three parts in different shades, to be honest. What I always feel is that the professional decisions are never independent of your personal life and what's going on in the personal life at a point in time. So for me, when I had shades of where I needed a personal time, enterprise working really helped me out because I had that little bit of time to just maneuver and do what I wanted. And when I was really focused on career growth or just the learning, my last 5 years in PropertyGuru was phenomenal, where I've learned tons as we scaled up from where we were to where we are right now. So at different juncture, I definitely enjoyed all the parts, but the ones that are obviously the closest to me is my startup days, where I started my gig called Alum Club, and you growing that step by step. It's grueling, it's hard, but you just cherish it. I just love those days. There's always on the edge kind of a feeling, but it's well worth it.
Okay, all right. So let's talk a little bit about Alum Club as well. That was your startup that you founded, obviously, and I believe that your function there was as the CEO, right? So yeah, and the question that I've always found interesting for product people who've gone on to do their own thing is always like that transition between doing product versus being the CEO, right? That's a big jump. Because I mean, so let me lay out the context, right? So the old adage is the PM is the mini CEO. And now we all say that, yeah, yes, but not really. Because a lot of things the CEO does that a product manager cannot do, right? Like as a CEO, you can just decide, hey, we're going to work 3 days a week, and nobody, pretty much nobody's going to be able to tell you no. But the other part of it is also the CEO has to oversee so many other aspects, right? Especially around, operations and, people and money. So yeah, for you, how did you handle that part? Like, was it really just let's start this and then see what happens, or was it like, okay, I know I'm gonna have to take charge of all these areas which I'm not familiar with? Yeah, how was that happening?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the journey is always one milestone ahead, is what I think. So in the startup world, you always long for. So let me just give you an example of Allen Club so that you can relate to it. So Harvard and the Western institutions receive endowments of billions of dollars every year, and I found that Asian institutions and Indian institutions in particular don't receive as much, and their endowments from the alumni are sporadic. And this is important because if you get the endowments, and you can build great infrastructure, scholarships, and better research from your institutions that can help the society at large. So that was the mission that we were on. And when I started this, we had to sell to educational institutions to manage the alumni, and we couldn't make a sale for the first 3-4 months. In spite of asking customers will they buy it, even before writing a single line of code, we did all by textbook, but nothing happened. And it was frustrating to a point where you felt that, okay, what is that going wrong? How is that every juncture we're not able to move? And all your thinking is about cracking that first sale, right? And eventually you do it. And then once you do it, you then think about what is your next, how do you get your next 5 customers? So it's always this milestone-based journey that you're going on, where your product does serve. And then beyond that, there are other things as well: managing your investors, managing your advisory board, managing your finance, tax file. There are a whole bunch of other things that also comes along. It's possibly 30% of your work. At least when what I was doing at that point in time was 30% of my work, but that less 70% gets you going. There's so many things that just happens that takes you going. And if you contrast that PM as a product CEO to that of a larger CEO, definitely there's a lot more aspects to the CEO job as that of the PM job. But I feel like you get a lot of grounding and training in the PM role to segue into that CEO role and take up a bigger chunk. As long as you're exposed to a lot many things as you're doing PM, because PM again is a very broad term. I mean, it's loosely defined across different. But if you're getting exposed to marketing, if you're getting exposed to, let's say, business case building, if you're getting exposed to some kind of finance, if you have these building block pricing, if you get the exposure to these things, then obviously it becomes much more easier when you then ladder up the big role.
Okay, yeah. I saw this. Now I can't find it. I'm just trying to find it. But somebody posted on LinkedIn, right? Who do you think makes the best CEO? And there was like product manager, there was like marketing, there was sales, and I was like, yeah, that's a little bit hard to say, right? So, but if I were to throw that question to you, given your experience of having been, the CEO and founder of your own startup, would you say that, between the different functions that, the general functions that you have in an organization, that being in product management gives you an edge, or do you think that or do you think there's any other thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think a good leader makes a good CEO. And that good leader can come from anywhere, whether it's marketing, sales, finance. I don't think that really matters. And this product manager is a passport to a CEO is not completely true, because product manager plus leadership is a passport to the CEO. That is a better way of framing it. And that leadership traits, like how do you set up vision? How do you inspire the team? How do you then make decisions? How do you manage your time across various stakeholders? I mean, there's tons of stuff which to some element product covers, but most of the times you may not get to do it. And I feel like anybody who can showcase this ability of being curious, being, is in the learning mode, can drive a team towards its mission, is very clear-headed as to where they are going to go, is even keel in the tough times. Those are the ones which will elevate you to the next level. So while PM will do some kind of throws you here and there shades of things, I think it's important that you groom your leadership skills to get to the place where you are.
Yeah. I like how someone put it to me. I can't remember. Again, I lose track of all these conversations these days. Maybe I'm just getting old. But someone mentioned this to me. It's like, it would seem that at the start of your product career, you're focusing a lot on the hard skills, right? You're learning your frameworks, you're learning all this hard stuff. And the higher up you go, you realize that it's really the soft skills that are the things that are going to get you really far, because that's when you're dealing with more people and, having to understand them, influence them, and encourage them.
Yeah, and one other item to add in here is that what PM role gives you, maybe marketing and sales does it as well, is that an ability to understand customers and also think customer plus plus, customer minus minus. So meaning, what does it mean for us to enhance this customer's life in 3 years' time down? A sales guy is far more focused in the immediacy. Marketing has some kind of a long-term planning as well. So, but I think this angle to the customer is pretty powerful. So no matter which organization you're coming from, but as long as you embrace this concept to complete wholeness, then I think there's a chance of then you being in a good seat as a CEO along with good leadership traits. So PM by that angle gives you a little more edge against the other roles.
Because of the ability to get involved and stuck in with not just the customer journey, but the customer lifetime as well, right? Yeah, I love that part. So yeah, for those of you who are listening or watching, I mean, these are the nuggets that, I can't even spell it out for you, but guys like Vivek, and all the other guests on the show, they're dropping lots and lots of wisdom bombs here. So pay attention. So let's talk about PropertyGuru, right? So you decided to move to Singapore to join PropertyGuru. You've been there a long time. What were the challenges, or what were the biggest challenges when joining PropertyGuru? Like, was it the geographical relocation? Was it the culture? Was it or was it the role? What was it that you had to do when you moved to PropertyGuru?
I've been very fortunate that I took a right decision. PropertyGuru is very welcoming, is very warm and collegial. I don't know if you've ever been to our office. If you do, you will understand that one, it's very diverse in terms of the people are from almost 32 countries across the world. And then you will feel that there's an instant way you will hit it off with people. It's just that there's an environment which has never changed within us for the last 5 years. So you immediately feel home and you get going. The challenge for us was we were leader in the industry. At the same time, the product making within PropertyGuru was not to where it was supposed to be. So and then a big credit to Jason as well. Jason and I then started putting in mechanisms by which we got a lot more formal processes there of how product management can be done. We got in good PMs. So the whole org evolution of product happened as we were so like as I said, we were already a market leader. It's just about how we were evolving as a product team was what is interesting through the path.
Okay, so it sounds like the main area to really get better at or to be the best at probably was the product side of things. Sort of, was it scaling the team or hiring the team or just putting in the right processes in place?
Look, I have this theory that in order to make PropertyGuru was largely a sales-led company. From a sales-led, if you want to make sure that you're product-led, there are certain muscles that you need to build. So just to clarify what I mean by sales-led is who's carrying the weight of the organization. If it's your sales team, which is now flagged quarter on quarter or half yearly to just get the numbers month on month or whatever the cadence is, then you're being sales led. In a product-led organization, the product will unleash opportunities for you that you've never imagined, that you can go out and now create value and capture value from there. So that's kind of the distinction that I have in mind. But to get anywhere, you need to start building the muscles that gets you to become one of these. So the way we architected this journey is that we said, okay, how do we better understand customers? So then we had the right team in place who were doing research on a constant basis. And then that research, then, within the research, there were multiple parts that we evolved. Like we've started doing much more ethnographic research. And there's a steady cadence where customers come into PropertyGuru on a regular basis. So we started understanding them very well. Second is analytics, right? The analytics part of it. So in analytics, I have two branches. One is, do you have a clean, pristine data to understand what people are doing? So, and in adherence to their privacy. So we've always done that. We cleaned up the whole mess of data and we ensured that we got the best in class data. And I can tell you proudly say that we possibly have one of the best data sources, maybe across prop tech in Southeast Asia. The next part is in the analytics is, do you have a culture of experimentation and learning through that? And then how do you bring in that culture? So we imbibe that culture into it. The third thing that happens in a growing company is that too many projects are chased by too few resources most times, right? Let's do this, let's do that, let's do this. And then how do you bring sense into it? How do you then integrate and bring kind of sense, saying that, hey, these are the three priorities. Let's go and crack at them. That took us a bit of journey, but we eventually got there. The fourth one is when I joined PropertyGuru, the product tech team was in the 17th floor, marketing sales were in the 11th floor, while they were in different floors as in the same building. Figuratively, also, it was almost like there were two different companies operating separately.
There were two different cultures.
Yeah, culture is almost the same. It's just that it was a very siloed bit that we had at that point in time. From there, I think we've now come a long way of now being together. So you will never see a product guy not having consulted the marketing guy or sales guy. That's like a big journey from where we started to where we are right now. And the last bit is on the execution, which is when we started, one of the things that we did was consistent delivery so that the stakeholders are happy we say what we do. And so we started shipping stuff on a regular cadence, and we say something will happen in Q2, it will happen in Q2. And once we got to that mode of regularity, the next part was what Marty calls it, empowered or what have you. So which is basically now elevate the team and say that, okay, stop asking the questions around time of whether we're shipping the project. Let's see in the time we're hitting the results. So that's the journey that we are on right now, and we're progressing fairly well.
Okay, so you bring up multiple interesting points. So we're gonna really jump and try to capture as many of these conversations as possible. First question or first observation, right? You made this really heavy hitting point of how in your time in PropertyGuru, the journey was really from being a sales driven organization to being a product driven organization. Now, the reason why I think this is super interesting, super loaded as well, is because in Southeast Asia, especially at least from my point of view, many companies are trying to do that. Like, it's still a predominantly sales-driven company where your monthly meetings are all, the main discussion is around how much money we're making, how many people are we selling to, regardless of which industry that you're in, right? It's usually driven by the numbers game. So given that you've done all of this hard work, and of course, it's with the product team as well, my question would be, if you are a product manager in a sales-driven organization and you are trying to make that journey, right, help the company become more product-driven as opposed to sales-driven, what would your advice be in terms of trying to help shift that mindset?
I would advise that I would advise to start being far more outcome focused. And it's a journey. First of all, keep your temperament in check, because it's going to be a journey that you'll start going through. The length of the journey is subject to different or the climate within the organization, how political, non-political, a lot of these things matter. But let's say you want to really truly make it product led as a product manager. If you're a product leader, then it's at a different level. But can you ship outcomes is what you need to say. Can you show demonstrate a quick win in terms of saying that, okay, this is how I move the needle for the company. Look, this is my next big opportunity I'm going to chase. I'm going to move the needle. If you start making impact in the smallest element, maybe the other product org will follow suit. If the entire product org will follow suit, then there's a good chance that the company will start betting on you right now, right? So it's underneath these fancy terms of sales driven, product driven. At the end of the day, at the CEO CTP said, the question is, who is going to give me the outcomes that I'm looking at? So let's say I'm a VC funded guy. I'm measured on my top line, and is the sales going to give me my top line? Is the product going to give me my top line? And he's going to take the sites which is going to give them. And it's important that as the leaders, if you can demonstrate it to some level, saying that, look, this is what we've got and we're getting there, and this is the journey that we're embarking, I'm sure you will win support. And then same thing, if you're PE supported, then you will be looked at margins. Then the question is, how can you drive margins for your CEO, and how are you demonstrating that in smaller projects, bigger projects? And as you do that consistently, there's a chance that you will then be pivoting towards the direction that we want.
Okay, interesting. So again, just driving down this path, right? You assuming that the organization is such that they feel like, hey, let's go down this path of not being, just sales driven, and we want to be product driven. And like you said, right, it's all about the outcomes. What would, realistically, what would a company start by tracking it rather than just raw numbers that you're getting in order to become a more product driven organization? Like, what would be the baby steps for anyone listening or watching about how do you, what do you measure? Because like, it's well and good when we say outcomes, and that's always a nice thing to hear. But at the end of the day, like, what would outcomes look like in order to sway influence in your favor as a product leader or even as a product team?
That's a great question. So I believe it's a job of either the product leader there or the business leaders there, or if you have a strategy person, then sit down with the strategy person to see what it is. I mean, different configurations of organization can work in different ways, but essentially you're looking at a constellation of metrics which is going to drive your business forward. So let me repeat. I'm not talking about North Star. I'm talking about constellation of key metrics that possibly will take you to the next level. And for your own sense, if you can take that one thing and then within the constellation of metrics, you can take one of those things and then give it down to the team, they'll start working towards it. So for instance, when we started embarking on that journey with PropertyGuru, my question is, what are we trying to solve for here? Like, what's really the path that we're doing? And if you look at our job right now, as we have defined ourselves, is more about matchmaking, call in with the best property it's available in the market. And similarly, from a property perspective, the best buyer available in the market. So we are essentially trying to matchmake really well. And what I then need to measure is the quality of these matches which is happening. That's our core metric. And once you can define it, you will see that everything just then organizes around underneath it. Obviously, the constellation of metrics then means that for quality of matches, I need to have good quality of supply, good quality of buyers. There's a whole bunch of other things that will come along with it. But you can come to the essence of what is very important and then just break it down into the subcomponents and say that, hey, team A, you work on this, team B, you work on this. This is the what of the equation, right? To get to this what of the equation, this is possibly 30%. The 70% needs to be on the behavior of your organization. The behavior of your organization then goes back to what I said in the earlier part, which is about, are you having enough customer understanding? Are you driving good analytics? Are you being strategic enough? Are you working in silos or are you collaborative? Are you executing towards outcome or output? So this behavior will drive in eventually that 30% of the North Star metric or the constellation of metrics that you're looking at.
Very nice. This is great. This is awesome stuff, Vivek. So yeah, I think, again, the reason why I asked this question as well is because it's not an uncommon question, right? I'm sure you've heard your share of questions of how do I not become sales-led? And it's always good to hear from someone in the space who has done it. So I thought it was a great question to pose to you. So thank you so much for answering that. Now,
Thank you.
next question that I want to jump into is that in Property Guru, it is something that actually you pointed out when we were prepping for the show, is also that you've had a wealth of experience dealing with products that are pretty much seasonal, right? In Property Guru, people are buying houses. It's not something that happens every month. Into it again, when they want to do their taxes, they're going to look for you. So tell me, or actually not just tell me, tell everyone, what what is it that makes a product like this successful? Because the thing is, and this is the part which I'm very excited to discuss, is that in a lot of cases, right, your books that are written, and this is not a knock on anyone who writes books, by the way. I love all these writers, but the best examples always come from B2C, I feel, right? Because that's where you get to tell all the juiciest stories about how it's done and things like that. But there's not really that many that tell you, intimate stories or success stories around the products that are seasonal. So I would love to hear it from your point of view.
Yeah, thanks for asking this. Look, I think my career has happened so much so that in the last 10 years I've been managing what I call as infrequent products. So I choose this term as against, and you'll understand why in a bit. And then, because as you rightly said, I was looking at TurboTax, which is once a year. Before that, they just come, file the taxes, and then they leave. And then now property, which is they buy once or twice or thrice in a lifetime. And between that, you don't know really what they're doing. And when I look at it from a product management perspective, as you rightly said, most books are written by B2C, and most B2C books are also about these frequent products. How do you then get them into a habit loop and what have you?
Exactly.
Look at the plethora of products around us. They are infrequent. They don't touch you on a frequent basis. And I personally found that this is one of the hardest ones to manage. The more the degree of infrequency, the higher you're going to have a trouble managing it. So let me put a case in point. The dating apps don't get funded that easily. The reason is because it's a one-time gig, hopefully. People will come, they find their match and they leave, and then how do you then map the LTV as against the cost of acquisition if it's just one-time gig or two times gig? The second is, and this all of these things creates a unviable business model. And third is you don't control the key experience. The key experience is actually happening outside, right? The core part of the experience is not within your product. Then how do you control some of these things? And you can't even close the loop. You can't go out into a dating scenario and ask, hey, how was the date? How did this go? So that I can then update my profile. So you can do some of these things, but it's very hard to do, is all I'm saying. So I want you to first imagine a spectrum of products, which is infrequent. And on this spectrum of products, on the extreme right-hand side, you're going to see where you have complete control over the experience. And then on the left-hand side, you don't have control over the experience. So the complete control over the experience are products like TurboTax, which I've managed in the past, complete SaaS solution where you can come, file taxes, and leave. Where part experience is controlled is products like Airbnb, where you just do the booking here, but you still experience something out there with a host and you need to go through that. Maybe, so that's one example. And then in this extreme left, you have products like PropertyGuru, where job sites like Indeed, LinkedIn, all of these things form on this side, where you apply for a job, but you don't control the interview process. You don't know how the offer part went. There's so many parts. The crucial part of the experience actually lies outside the product. And I've been long plagued with this thought as to how do you then navigate this, right? How do you then look at these spectrums? So the way you can do this is there are 4 dimensions that you can crack. Like, for instance, you take these product and then split them on these 4 dimensions and see how you can manage it. And I'll talk one by one. The first one is you take a frequency and say that which one is on one spectrum, it's infrequent, the other spectrum, it's frequent, right? The example of infrequent is a property site example. The frequent one, example of a frequent one, like I don't know if you've ever had a chance to hear Rich Barton, Colin, have you?
No, I've not.
Richard Barton is the founder of Expedia, Zillow, Glassdoor. That guy is just specialized in creating products that are all infrequent, yeah, all through his life, and successful as well. One thing that he's done extremely well across his life is, if you've seen, he's planted those frequency baits. Like Glassdoor is the review site,
Yeah.
but it's got this frequency hook of salary. So if you want to check salary, you can always go out and check and come back. Similarly, Zillow has this frequency hook called Zestimate, where you can go once in a while and check how much your house is worth. LinkedIn did this extraordinary job of converting their job site into this user feed. If you imagine LinkedIn's journey, it was a member profile. They slapped jobs on top of it, where you start going once in 4 years or 3 years. Then they slap the user feed on top of it. Now you're almost there every week, every day, possibly, right? That's journey from infrequency to frequency. So that's the first dimension of looking into it. The second dimension is low order value versus high order value, right? What can you like really, if you, so low order values are the ones which are like lead-based businesses and what have you. High order value is like when you're selling at Tiffany, for instance. You don't buy a Tiffany every day. The expensive jewelries are bought once in a while, hopefully. So that's on your higher order value. The third bit is the paid marketing on one side, because that's how you start as a startup, and eventually you have direct market, a lot of organic traffic flowing to you either through SEO, direct, and whatever. There, I think the brand plays a big role, like what Airbnb has done. I mean, it's incredible, right, for a travel site that they have gone out and ensured that they've created a brilliant brand around it. And most travelers, it's very unlikely that they've not heard of Airbnb out there. So no matter how infrequent you go, that's there at the top of your mind to go out directly and check them out. And the last bit is what I call is how much control you have over the experience versus no control over the experience versus how much control you have over the experience, right? Now, there's an interesting pattern you need to see, and I call this the Criss-Cross Theory. If you're infrequent, if you look at these 4 dimensions that I just plotted, the first dimension was frequency. Second dimension was about order value, small order value, large order value. Third was about traffic, whether you're paid versus organic. And fourth was about the control of experience.
Yep.
So if you draw a crisscross, you will see that this is possibly the way you need to manage. So highly infrequent, then go for a high order value. Don't settle for a smaller order value. Ensure that there's some kind of a paid marketing, and then have higher degree of control over your experience. So this then gives you a cohesive strategy. Now, example, I don't know how much you know about this iBuyer model, Open Door, Zillow, all of these guys have gone into like really the next evolution of prop tech. What they've done is, hey, Colin, you want to sell a home? Give it to me, I'll sell it for you.
Yeah.
So they are very infrequent, but they've settled for a higher order value. And it doesn't hurt them to do a paid marketing, because that's still going to be taken care by the LTV of the product, and they have complete control over the experience. And the other side is also true. If you're more frequent, then settle for lower order value. Look for direct traffic or brand as much as possible. And it's okay to give the control of experience outside. You can still do it. So it's something that I think is very helpful for all the infrequent businesses. And if they can have a frame of thinking and can migrate their business from one lever to the other lever, it'll give them a better hook in terms of their strategy.
Nice. Wow. Look, guys and girls, you've just got like this mini session with Vivek, all on a show that's less than an hour long. So that's fantastic, Vivek. So in terms of, let's say we're talking, because these are very strategic level levers that you're thinking about and how you're going to move that. So let's pull it one step lower, right? You have all these, your order levels, you want it on the high order level, it's infrequent, that experience is not something that you can control. So you focus on the areas which are in your product's control. Now, how would you go about trying to do proper and reasonable discovery and user testing? Because the thing about infrequent products is that, like you say, right? Like you bought a house. What's the experience like? Oh, it was great, but that person has nothing to benchmark against, right? Like you ask an e-com platform, it's easy, right? Oh, I like this platform A because it's cheaper. This one has free shipping. That one has something. But when it's infrequent, it's very hard to get proper benchmarkings against other players in the field, and usually even if they do, it's once or twice in their lifetime. In the case of, let's say, prop tech, maybe some others are seasonal, like tax is once a year. How would you go about sort of building that muscle of getting the right people to speak to, understanding what is it that they need in order to drive the decisions around, like you said, high order value and things like that?
Yeah, so that's a challenge that I've always found in the customer side of infrequent products. For instance, when we were researching product for tax as to how they file taxes, and input in the days of input, we used to follow what we call as follow me home. And if you've ever heard of
yes,
it,
yeah. I read about it too.
it's super nice, man. It's super nice. So you go and sit next to a user and you observe like how they do it, and then you then glean out insights. Now there is definitely a difference between a frequent product and an infrequent product. Example: in the frequent product, you can always create a customer panel. Let's say you know that these are your power users of LinkedIn. I'm just taking LinkedIn as an example. You create them as your customer panel. You can bounce off ideas and what have you. In infrequent, you don't have the luxury because these guys are going to come once in a while. So that's one issue. The second thing is so there's always a churning customer base. It's not like you can recruit once and live with them. Your research team has to go out, or research team or UX team, whoever is doing this stuff, or product team needs to go out and constantly research for customers who are in the market at that point in time doing this work. So that's going to be a tall order. But what I found to be of merit is this going back to the follow me home, it seems to be a far more effective way of doing researches as against just the vanilla research of asking people. The reason being, while you may not still get the true essence of as much as a frequent product, when I did the research, so I'll give you a contrast. So when we interviewed users of how they file taxes, we got these tactical fixes saying that, can you improve this for me? Can you improve that for me? And so on and so forth. And so then we go into this guy's home and we sit out at his place in California. And he's going to his room where he says that's his usual room, and you opening his usual laptop where he can file taxes. So we sat next to him. And what is interesting is he carried this box along with him, which is with a pile of documents. Now, the way TurboTax works is you take your forms, like whatever that form is, job, salary form, whatever it is, and you take that, and every time TurboTax asks you a question, you file in that details.
Yeah,
that's how it works. And this guy, and then you ask this series of, we answer the series of questions. It takes 3 to 4 hours, and your taxes are done for the year.
Yeah.
Right. So this guy gets a box with a pile of documents, and he sits and he sieves through those documents for every question that is coming up. He rumbles in his box, he gets a document, and then he files in.
Yep.
What's interesting as a product manager is I said, how long did it take you to put those documents in the box? And this never came up even in a single interview. And then this guy says it took him 3 to 4 hours to collect this document. And that was a big problem space for us that we could chase and then solve for the user. So I feel as you lean on to the infrequent, as you are more infrequent, doing ethnography researches could yield much higher degree of insights as compared to the normal discovery and setting that we do. Not necessarily saying that you should not interview users on a regular basis. If you can, please do. Mm-hmm. But to get those solid big rocks, ethnography could be a great help for you.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Vivek. That was really interesting. Okay, so I have one last question for you before we go into my favorite section of the show. So I wanted to ask you, in terms of the product scene, you've been in Singapore now for like what, 5 years? Is it 5 years? Yeah. So you've been in Singapore for like 5 years. You're very immersed in the product scene. What do you think the future of product management in Southeast Asia? What's it going to look like in a few years' time, right? Because that's something that I'm curious to know as well.
Yeah, I guess it's rapidly evolving, to say the least. If I look at the interview of people, when I compare the quality against what I did against 5 years as to what I'm doing right now, I see there's a light year shift in terms of the talent out in this side of the market. So it's rapidly evolving. There are more companies embracing product. As you know, big shops are also coming up within the side of the region. So it's all welcoming move, which is going to develop this ecosystem as a whole into the in the future. What I hope to see, and what I think we should work towards as a community, is developing the next set of product leaders. And I see a big gap, especially when I'm looking to hire senior talent in the team. That's when I see a massive gap. So that if there could be a very solid community and a way in which we can groom the future talent, especially in the senior leadership, I think that can do a lot of good in the industry. But otherwise, I think this place is vibrant. It's just the best I've seen so far, with the kind of talent, with the kind of people, the community things that are happening. For case in point, when any major releases is happening, you see that all these big guys also want to have a share of voice within the APAC region, and so that's a testimony by itself. So this place is really, really evolving to the next level, in my opinion. What I would see is, what I hope to see and what I might see in the future is, with all these incoming tech, big companies and what have you, fintech is already well grown in this space, but you might see the other offshoot of other sectors like edtech and other things, which we're sparsely seeing right now, that might come up. Health tech and edtech and all these things might come up. But you might also see specialized PMs. The way you know the maturity of a market is also that, one, there's enough liquidity of talent there. And the second thing is, if you can start getting specialized skills like, hey, I need a retention PM, I need this growth PM, and those guys are there in the market, that's going to come up. And I hope that we will get towards that. And I'm already seeing shades of it. I'm pretty confident that it's a matter of time we get there as well.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah, very interesting things. I have more questions even from what you've just said, but I'll leave this for another time. I always tell all my guests I have the same problem, right? Because there's so many things to cover, and it always seems like one session is not enough. But we'll see. I think it's always good to have different sessions, and who knows? One of the things I'm talking about is, maybe we'll have group sessions as well. They'll be interesting to have, a group of PMs talk to each other. So let's see how that goes. All right, let's go to the final part of the show, which is my favorite part. And I always ask my guests, hey, can you recommend a song to our viewers and our listeners, that you would recommend? So this is always an interesting challenge, because it's very it's a out of left field, so many people don't expect it, and so I enjoy this part. So maybe why don't you tell us about the song and the title that you chose?
Yeah, look, if you're listening this over the weekend, my favorite artist, Jack Johnson. I'm a big fan of alternative rock, and I feel he's the king of alternative rock. So Jack Johnson, Breakdown, is one of my favorite. I suggest you check it out. It's just catchy. It's so soothing. It's just a warm music over the weekend.
Very nice. Ironically, my sons, they love Jack Johnson now, because they watched the Curious George movie, and then his song is on the show, and so they've been like looping that song over and over. So when you said, hey, my song is Jack Johnson, I know that guy. So it's very, very interesting. So that's pretty much it. I think, check it out, by the way. Whatever Vivek said about Jack Johnson is very, very true. Like he's got this very unique songwriting style and arrangement. It's not over the top. It's very relaxed, but at the same time, it's not folk. It's not hard rock. But this is his very easy listening vibe that goes into it. So go check it out. Link will be up here somewhere. I don't know. I never pointed right anyway. So so thank you so much, Vivek, for being on the show. And like I said, the wisdom bombs that you were dropping have been amazing. And so I guess in closing, Vivek, is there anything that you would like to leave with our viewers and listeners, or any thoughts, or yeah, anything you want to say?
Yeah, I think I'll leave with a couple of thoughts. One is, uh, when I did my startup, the biggest lesson that I learned is your product just need not be important. Uh, so we went and asked almost 30 customers before writing a single line of code. And then when we went back to selling to them, zero customers bought it. And I always scratch my head as to what went wrong. And eventually we scaled it to a certain extent, but we had trouble scaling it to the extent that we wanted. And this is an alumni solution selling it to the educational institution. Yeah. And so the core lesson for me there was, it's just not okay if your product is important. It has to be both important and urgent that they buy it right now. And that lesson always stuck on to me. The second thing is, feel free to challenge the product management ecosystem as is. There's a ton of things that I think will evolve in the product management space itself, not just in APAC, but overall. Like, for instance, I have argued very strongly, why is product manager a single person job? Then you're basically looking for a unicorn all the time, a person who can be strategic, tactical, a person who can look at big picture, detailed thinking, a person who can look at creativity, empathize with the customers, and look at data. I mean, this is like really looking for a unicorn. It's not that unicorns are not there, but that search is hard.
Yeah.
And I've argued in a separate blog saying that there are two guys who could possibly, like, if there's a pair programming, there could be a pair product management as well. That's my thought. It could be wrong. But the point here is, you need to challenge what we're seeing there, and so that we all evolve into a better space tomorrow. So that's all I've got for you folks.
Very nice.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vivek. And yeah, I think that's the perfect way to close, right? Never be afraid to challenge. Ironically, one of the most recent talks that I did also mentioned the same thing, right? You never be afraid to go against the grain, because it's not to say that what people write about, talk about, and what's accepted as canon, is always true. But the thing that the devil is always in the context, I feel. And I think that's where, if we find that there are better ways of doing it, and this space is always evolving, always challenge it. Don't be afraid to go against the grain. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that was Vivek Kumar, the VP of Products for PropertyGuru Group, who has really spent an exciting hour or so, to really explain about all things product. So it's been a fantastic show. So, folks, I will see you again in our next episode. Until then, please, like I always say, be safe. And again, in this episode, I want to really call out, being safe mentally, right? So if mentally you're not feeling well, you need help, please reach out. And if that means you want to reach out to me, I'm fine too. You're going to be dealing with a mad guy, but sure, I'll be very happy to support anyone who needs mental help. So please be safe and take care. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.